Disclaimer.
Hey, what's up, internet peoples? It's me, Derrek BREINDEL, and I'm here to bring some realness to this dumpy little YouTube channel. Well, folks, the Halloween Horror Nights season has officially come to a close, which means it's time for the Horror Nights community to do its 3 favorite things aside from going to the event. Number 1, reminiscing on all the awesome memories we've made over the course of this year's event. Number 2, complaining about how modern HHN is worse now than it ever was in previous year's events. And finally, speculating on all of the future offerings coming to next year's Halloween Horror Nights event. Now, for those of you folks who have never tuned into this broadcast before, your host, Derrek BREINDEL, well, he's a very popular guy because I make lots of friends in a lot of interesting places. So it is my pleasure to tell you folks that I have an insider source inside of the HHN creative team who has given me the insider scoop on all of the plans that they have made for Halloween Horror Nights 32. And I am here to give all of yous that information today. This is the only speculation map you'll ever need. Some of yous might be wondering who this mysterious insider source is, to which I can only say that I cannot risk them getting in trouble. However, I can in fact say that their names definitely do not rhyme with Eichel Maelio or Mon Journey. And for those of you who are wondering why I'm talking about theme parks on my show about the movies, yous are probably not aware that the Halloween Horror Nights has a rich history of producing scary attractions based on some of the most beloved horror flicks of both the modern and the classic eras. And even if that wasn't the case, guess what, man? This is my show, and this is where I bring yous the realness about whatever I feel like talking about today. So, if yous don't like that, you can go ahead and go listen to one of those industry players who do nothing but suck up to the Hollywood machine and stuff while they go around chasing after your money, man. If that's what you want, go listen to those guys. But if you're here, it's because yous are not afraid of the realness, as backed up by the facts and logic of my expertly crafted opinions. So, without further ado, let me take yous all on a very interesting journey to the future of Halloween Horror Nights 32. Cue the spooky music. Alright, so we're gonna start off with a bit of good news and some bad news. You see, the theming for next year's Halloween Horror Nights event will look almost identical on both the East and West Coasts, which will include the returning of many concepts from the past, as well as ideas that have yet to be produced for the Horror Nights that fans have been starving for several years. The creative teams are, in fact, very excited to be bringing these long dormant projects to life, much like the Bug House from Horror Nights 31, which was allegedly an idea proposed for several years before it finally got approved and became a surprise smash hit. However, the big downside is that because the creative team is bringing a lot of these older ideas back and giving these fans what they want, in addition to all of the construction we will be seeing in the Orlando parks, with the impending demise of places like the Woody Woodpecker lands, we will be seeing some restructuring of the event as a whole, which means that both coasts will feature no more than 9 haunted house mazes. But despite the downsizing of Horror Nights mazes, these houses will be bigger, longer, and better than ever before seen, in addition to some of the new and returning experiences at the event. So, let's start getting into the real nitty-gritty. For this year's Horror Nights event, we are going to see a return of the icons as the face of the event, and it will feature not just one, but 2 of the icons. That's right, folks. Halloween Horror Nights 32 will feature the gruesome twosome of the director and the usher, teaming up to bring yous twice the terror, especially for the movie geeks, man. The story goes, the director and the usher are teaming up to bring Universal Orlando and Universal Hollywood onto the silver screen in a new, terrifying way, turning the parks into the latest hot set for the director's newest series of snuff films. And he has brought on the usher to help support the production with his unique eye for film history. These quote-unquote hot sets will include cameos from icons and original characters from Horror Nights past, and will most prominently feature the character of Eddie Schmidt, the freaky chainsaw guy. As part of this year's story, Eddie will be playing the role of the head of special effects and stunt coordination to make the director's films extra gory and action-packed while keeping the budget low for the suits. You see how there's some meta commentary going on there with the state of modern Hollywood filmmaking? That's that good shit right there, man. Those guys are smart. Now, not only are we getting this dream team up, but they will be the reason this year's HHN marks the return of the event to Islands of Adventure, because these hot sets will extend to both Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure, with the director using the sets and facades of Universal Studios as backdrops for his movies, while the usher transports you into the worlds of different films over at Islands. Now over at Hollywood, this split will instead be represented through the upper and lower lots, but we're gonna focus on Orlando for now, and we'll get more into the differences over at Hollywood towards the end of the video. During this event, in addition to opening up the pathways between the two parks, like they do for Grad Bash, we will also have free access to the Hogwarts Express, which the HHN team has been given free reign to toy with, producing extra spooky video shows for both journeys between studios and islands, which will feature a dose of both horror and comedy. Current plans include 2 unique shows. One trip will feature spooky visuals outside the window of your train while you witness the shadows of a murder just outside your door as committed by an anonymous janitor who struggles to clean up the mess he's made before the journey ends and he gets caught. Meanwhile, the other trip back will feature the train getting possessed by the ghost of a train conductor, complete with flickering lights, rattling seats, and a brief trip into the underworld just outside your window. Furthermore, in addition to having several rides open at Universal Studios like in previous years, including but not limited to The Mummy, the Transformers, and the Men in Black, Islands will also feature several rides operating during Horror Nights with new spooky enchantments. Hagrid's Motorbike Adventure will receive a new Halloweeny lighting package and some added fog effects to make your journey through the Forbidden Forest a little extra spooky. Additionally, Dr. Doom's Freefall will receive the much requested additional drop. And finally, during the event, they will be operating the Cat in the Hat ride. And that shit's scary on its own, man. They don't even gotta turn the lights off or anything for that ride, man, but if they did, I think riding in the dark while smelling all that permanent stench of the soiled diapers that's stuck in all the carpets, that would be enough to rattle even the most hardcore of horror aficionados. With Horror Nights 32 being split between 2 parks, that means we will be getting not 1, but 2 brand new Lagoon shows. In the first Lagoon show, taking place in Universal Studios, it will be called The Backstage Terror, as hosted by the director. And it will be more lore heavy, and it will be a water projection show showing how the director, the usher, and Eddie took over Horror Nights this year. The second Lagoon show, taking place in Islands of Adventure, will be called Mauling at the Movies, as hosted by the usher. Now that Lagoon show is a bit more straightforward. It's gonna be a journey through the evolution of horror movies, mostly the classic films, before getting taken over by Eddie and the director to show off the more recent horror movies like the 80s slashers and the IP houses for this year. Furthermore, the HHN creative team has heard the feedback regarding Nightmare Fuel Wildfire, as it being too similar to the previous Nightmare Fuel show, and they will be putting a temporary hold on this offering while they come up with a couple new magic tricks to put in the next installment for this show's story. So in the meantime, this year, we will see the temporary return of the beloved and long-missed Bill and Ted Show. It has been given the tentative title of Bill and Ted's Litmus Test. And while the show is returning, the team is still working on potential changes to the show format to modernize it for newer audiences. And I have also been told that there is currently a very hot debate on whether or not this new Bill and Ted Show should acknowledge the third and most recent Bill and Ted movie. It's still very under wraps. I don't got a lot of details about it. But based on what my insider source is telling me, if the show does prove to be a success and I suspect it will be, they might have Bill and Ted alternate with the Nightmare Fuel show to add further variety to the show offerings at this event. Now, with all those details out of the way, let's get to what yous maniacs really want to hear about: the scare zones and the haunted house mazes. Starting off with our scare zones, the front of both Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure will host scare zones based on the two icons of the year, the director and the usher respectively, setting the tone for the houses and scare zones inside of each of the parks. Additionally, the walkways between the two parks will feature a crossover scare zone, which has the minions of both the director and the usher terrorizing guests. While you Horror Nights geeks might be familiar with the usher's minions as a bunch of dorks who cosplay as him and mimic his every move, this will be the introduction of the director's film crew. Now, as we all know, making a movie is a collaborative process, and so the minions of the director will help further flesh out his backstory as to how he's getting all these movies produced while also evading the cops. The director's minions will include, but are not limited to, his production assistant, who snaps a clapperboard to scare the guests, the coffee gopher, who runs around with cups of coffee full of acids and poisons that they throw onto the guests to scare them, and finally, the boom mic guy, who runs around in a panic, struggling to capture good audio of all the screaming guests. That guy's my favorite. There will be, additionally, 2 extra scare zones for each of the 2 parks. So starting off with Universal Studios, there will be a scare zone specifically designed for Eddie Schmidt and his chainsaw drill team, which has been given the title of the Cage Room. Which, when you think about it, doesn't really make a lot of sense, because it's like outdoors and stuff, and it's more of a courtyard than anything else, but I guess calling it the Cage Courtyard just doesn't have that cool sounding ring to it, but I digress. This scare zone will mostly feature lots of chain link fences and dead-end corners and lots of maze-like areas for the scare actors to corner guests in, and it will be located near the Icon House for this park, because we are technically getting 2 Icon Houses for this year, folks, but I'm gonna touch on those later. Additionally, the final scare zone for the Universal Studios park has been given the working title of Lifetime Ban. In this scare zone, yous will come face to face with the absolute worst that a theme park experience has to offer, which will include, but is not limited to, hordes of screaming children, dogs taking fat dumps on the middle of the sidewalk, Karens who take their big plastic strollers and ram them into people's ankles, and also Disney adults. Absolutely terrifying stuff, folks. If you ask me, this zone has the potential to be the scare zone of the year. The creators behind these scare zones are currently fighting to see which of these 2 zones will be placed in the New York and San Francisco areas, as that will determine how large each scare zone is. So we will learn more when we get the confirmation that all this information is right. But anyways, moving over to Islands of Adventure, we got 2 more scare zones to cover before we start talking about those houses. So one of the scare zones over at Islands is a concept that the team has been holding on to since the earlier days of Halloween Horror Nights. We're talking the Crypt Keeper era, folks, the Mummy era. And that scare zone, which will be located in the Lost Continent, is going to be Gwa, Battle for Antarctica. The legendary shock rock group Gwa has come to reign terror on Islands of Adventure, featuring all of your favorite putrid scumdogs of the universe from the past and the present. This scare zone will feature tons of chilling sets based on the frozen wastes of Antarctica and ancient alien ruins and like crashed UFO spaceships and stuff, with lots of fake snow raining down on the guests. And it will basically be a sort of King of the Hill battle zone area where the scum dogs of Gwa are facing off against their many enemies, including Techno Destructo and Company, the Morality Squad, Skullhead Face, Cardinal Sin, and those mutant penguins. Some of yous might be thinking to yourself, "Hey, Derek, Gwa was mostly relevant in like the 90s and stuff, man. So why the hell are they getting a scare zone now?" To which I would like to ask you, do you know which famous fictional characters list Gwa as their favorite band? That's right, Beavis and Butthead, who recently got a reboot in the form of a brand new movie and a new TV show. And thus, using this reboot, they will use those characters to turn GWAR into an inclusion in Horror Nights by using Beavis and Butthead as a cameo, as the victims of GWAR's battle for Antarctica, thus making the band relevant again. You can't argue with that logic, man. That is some airtight logic. And for those of you who are concerned as to how Universal is gonna get away with using these GWAR characters when you consider the equipment that they wield in this band, I have absolutely no idea. And finally, in the last scale zone for Islands of Adventure, we've got yet another original concept, which is currently named Social Decay. This scale zone will mash up several older concepts from previous Horror Nights years under a radioactive nuclear apocalypse Mad Max-like theme, and it will exist in the superhero island. Among the terrors running around the streets of Marvel Island, there will be 2 gangs engulfed in a turf war, various zombies and mutants, and finally, the return of the Lizzie Borden Axe Corps from Halloween Horror Nights 4, who will now be sporting a more biker, leather serial killer look. The Lizzie Bordens will be considered a highlight of the zone, as they will swing their axes at guests and miss, scraping their weapons against the pavement beneath them to cause sparks, like those gravedigger dudes with the shovels over at the Rat Park. With all these scare zones detailed as they will appear in the park for this year's event, let's talk about those houses. Now, before we reveal the top secret houses for Horror Nights 32, let's address the possessed serial killing doll in the room and talk about the Chucky house. You see, just yesterday, on October 31st, Halloween Day, Universal revealed that HHN 32 would feature a Chucky house on both the East and the West Coasts. Now, this comes as no surprise, as the first haunted house announcement for Horror Nights 31 happened shortly after a leak regarding the Universal Classic Monsters house for that year. And I am positive that somebody let the Universal team know that this leak was coming, and so they quickly revealed the Chucky house in an attempt to prevent a complete leak of Horror Nights 32. But unfortunately for them, you can't do nothing to stop me from getting the realness to the peoples. And in their haste to reveal the Chucky house before the end of Horror Nights 31, Universal neglected to give yous the full details of that horror maze. You see, the Chucky house coming to Horror Nights 32 will primarily focus on retelling the story of the first 2 seasons of that Chucky TV series over on the Sci-Fi Network. But where that is the end of the story for the house over at Universal Orlando, Universal Hollywood will see a much more impressive display. In a rare win for the West Coast event, the Chucky house over in Hollywood will be implemented into the Terror Tram, having guests go through those first 2 seasons of the Chucky show, before experiencing a brand new original storyline created by the Universal creative team, which will include the implementation of the backlot sets and facades among other haunted house elements. The current plans for the West Coast house include a very meta storyline where Chucky comments on the overwhelming, overcomplicated, and very non-canon nature of the Terror Tram storyline, and will involve the cult of Chucky taking over the Bates Motel and Jupiter's Claim from the Jordan Peele film Nope, where we will see the appearances of Tiffany, Glenn/Glenda, as well as a cameo of Hollywood Harry as one of the many victims of Chucky's cult. Additionally, as part of this storyline, we will see the War of the Worlds plane crash set transformed into the ground zero for a plane hijacking committed by the cult of Chucky, and what may very well become the final use of that set for this event, should the rumored scheduled demolition and replacement come as expected. There's also some loose plans in the works to somehow involve the icons for this year's event, the usher and the director, into the Terror Tram carnage somehow. Potentially as a cameo, potentially as a bigger part of the storyline of this Chucky house / Terror Tram tour, but honestly, those details, they're still being hashed out, so I can't comment on them either way. But with all of those details about Chucky out of the way, I still got 8 additional houses to reveal to you as they will appear in Universal Orlando. Starting off with Universal Studios Park, we get to the first of the 2 houses based on our icons for the year. and this house will be simply titled Run for Your Life. The current description of this house that I was given is as follows, quote, "Come watch the latest slasher movie starring yous. The usher will guide yous to the hot set of the legendary director and introduce yous to the stunt coordination team as led by Eddie Schmidt. With your life in their very capable hands, the directions are clear and simple. Run for your life. This horror maze, which will be placed near the cage room scare zone, is expected to be a major hit among the Horror Nights fandom, bringing these fan favorite icons together in a way that has never before been experienced." Alright, so the next house in Universal Studios will take the ever popular Universal Classic monster houses of recent years and fuse them with an old classic from the days of Fright Nights. This house will be the Universal Monsters Present The Dungeon of Terror. This horror maze will see guests kidnapped and thrown in the Dungeon of Terror, where they will encounter terrors of the past alongside the Universal Classic monsters, all with one simple task: escape with your life. This house will include the return of many old friends from the days of Horror Nights long past, including the return of the Rat Lady, complete with her glass coffin that guests will be forced to walk over. Furthermore, as part of Universal's Inclusivity Initiative, the Rat Lady will be accompanied by her new counterpart, the Roach Man. It's a similar concept, except instead of a lady in a coffin with rats, it's a dude in a coffin with roaches, and you'll be walking over him too. And with the return of these two legends of the Horror Nights past, Universal will start selling some brand new merchandise that is expected to fly off the shelves, including a set of t-shirts which will simply read, "I'll be your Rat Lady and I'll be your Roach Boy." Of course, for those of you gender nonconformists or folks who generally don't enjoy these titles, there will be a third alternative t-shirt for you which simply reads, "I'll be your monster." And Universal will gladly take the money of used completionists who decide to purchase all three of these amazing shirts. Moving on to the third of our four houses over at the Studios Park, we get to a house inspired by a much beloved film, the one and the only Little Shop of Horrors. Now, before yous all get excited by the prospect of singing all these silly little musical songs with a discount Rick Moranis, I should specify that the team in charge of this horror maze is working off of the assumption that they will not be able to secure the rights to the classic 1980s film produced by the Warner Brothers. And so for the time being, this house will instead be themed to the Roger Corman film from the 1960s, which is conveniently part of the public domain. So, in the off chance that Comcast does not get to purchase Warner Brothers to become yet another global conglomerate in a race against Michael the Rat to win this real-life game of Monopoly, you will instead experience a black and white house, which depicts this version of Little Shop of Horror stories that most people haven't actually seen lately, but is still pretty good. And finally, this fourth and final house for the Universal Studios Park, we got a sequel to a fan favorite maze from Horror Nights 31. That's right, folks, we are getting a sequel to the Bug House. I have another description here for this house specifically, which reads as follows. In the original house, Bugs Eaten Alive, yous watched as a freak accident made bugs become gigantic and devoured the hapless victims of BuzzCon. But in Bug House 2, the script has been flipped, and yous, the guests, have become the bugs. As a giant bug, yous must escape from being exterminated by the US Army and the PR team over at BuzzCon. Team up with your brand new friends, Freddy the Fly, Wally the Wasp, Susan the Spider, and of course, Jumbo Grub, to escape those pesky exterminators. Evading various clouds of toxic gas, the house will end with an epic dance party with your buggy buddies, so be prepared to throw back that warmussy as you exit into the Minions dance room from the hit Universal ride Despicable Me Minion Mayhem, and enter a boogie wonderland with your insect pals. Wow. Yous honestly can't ask for more than that, folks. It truly sounds like the team at Universal is finally listening to everything that the fans could possibly want. But of course, it does not end there, and we still have 4 other Horror Nights mazes at Islands of Adventure. So, let's get to the horror houses over at Islands of Adventure. First of all, we have the Icons house for this park, which will feature the Usher. And this will be 3 houses for the price of 1, in a little horror maze called The Horrors of Hulu. Inside the Horrors of Hulu, guests will come face to face with scenes from 3 terrifying films. Now, the first of these 3 films featured comes to us following the tragic news of the Broadway closure of the Phantom of the Opera. And so, the first chunk of this house will feature scenes from the film The Phantom of the Paradise, much to the Usher's disappointment. The other 2 sections will feature scenes from the Predator sequel Prey, as well as a little hit movie yous might have seen, known only as Bad Hair. As the host of this house, the Usher will play the role of the narrator in each section, roasting the movies depicted, essentially making this the closest Horror Nights will ever get to a haunted house based on Mystery Science Theater 3000, which I also think will be pretty epic if I do say so myself. And I do say so myself. Throughout this house, the Usher will call The Phantom of the Paradise inferior to the Lon Chaney movie, despite its cool 80s vibes. He will also label the film Prey as inaccurate to Native American customs, and finally, he will roast Bad Hair as just a ridiculous concept. However, in the unlikely event that Universal cannot secure the rights to The Phantom of the Paradise for this house, they will instead retrofit those scenes to depict the film fresh, and have the Usher proclaim that the characters in this flick have bad taste in men. Rimshot. For the second house over at Islands of Adventure, we have a very unique concept inspired by the many musical houses we've had at past events, such as those featuring bands like Black Sabbath, Alice Cooper, and most recently, The Weeknd. This maze is currently known as Teenage Wasteland. In this haunted house, you will experience the most horrifying situation anyone can possibly be in, being a depressed teenager. Over the course of this house, you will encounter not 1, not 2, but 3 of your favorite musicians, Taylor Swift, Lorde, and Ariana Grande, as they team up to help you take on the physical manifestation of your nightmares, Ed Sheeran. The ending of this house, taking inspiration from Universal Monsters Legends Collide, will feature alternative endings every night, in which one of our 3 queens of music reigns supreme as the gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss bad bitch who decapitates Ed Sheeran, ending his terrible music career once and for all. It is sure to be a very popular house, and the lines for this maze alone will make buying an express pass worth it. For our third haunted house at Islands of Adventure, we get to see the return of a fan favorite scale zone, now fully realized as a haunted house maze. That's right, it is time to face your fears in Night Maze Eternal Torment. Much like the amazing scare zone from Halloween Horror Nights 21, this haunted house will bring new meaning to the term horror maze by being entirely in the dark and featuring black walls which the scare actors will be able to change on a whim. All black shadows will leap from the fog to scare you as yous all go through, running through this labyrinth of darkness scared out of your wits with a layout that changes at least every 10 minutes. And for those of yous who cannot find your way out of the night maze before the event is over, well, good luck. Cause that's when the Universal Gargoyles come out to feed on the stragglers. And finally, as our fourth and final horror maze over at Islands of Adventure, we got an extra special house for all of you horror fanatics. This is a house that the Horror Nights team has been trying to get made for years, and it almost happened more than once. It is based on one of the most highly regarded horror films ever made. And well, who am I kidding? You know it. Yous love it. Let me hear you say it. Scream Birds, Attack of the Nuclear Pigeon. It is a brilliant film which takes inspiration from both Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds and the fantastic modern environmentally conscious remake Birdemic, Shock and Terror. And it is one of the greatest horror movies of all time, featuring the terror of nuclear pollution and birds. This is one of the most highly requested haunted houses in all of Horror Nights history, and I am proud to let all of yous know it will be a major headlining house at Horror Nights 32. We've done a lot of talking about the Orlando experience, but for those of yous who call Universal Hollywood your home park, yous might be saying to yourself, that all sounds pretty cool, Derrek, but how are all them houses gonna fit in our itty bitty teeny tiny little baby park? To which I got a very simple answer. Cause the creative team at Universal are a bunch of geniuses, man. They think of everything. The solution to the space issue at Hollywood is solved with 3 simple words. Double-decker houses. Chew on that for a minute, folks. It is absolutely brilliant. Just take the haunted house and stack it on top of another one. And that's it. The spacing issue is done. Once they retrofit the Waterworld Theater to showcase all those lagoon projection shows, now you'll finally have a Halloween Horror Nights event packed to the gills with more attractions than you can shake your dog at. And well, folks, that about does it for this official, unofficial leak for all of Halloween Horror Nights 32, as given to me by a very reliable insider source inside of the Universal creative team. So, I want yous folks to get down in the comments below and tell us which of these haunted houses you're most excited to see, and maybe drop a like and subscribe or something, and be sure to share this video around and put it on your favorites and your bookmarks and stuff so that you can come back here and look back and see how right I was when we get those official announcements for Horror Nights 32. So until then, I guess I'll upload another video here the next time Greg leaves his dumpy little YouTube channel open on the company computer. Alright, take care, bye-bye.